I've always been told I'm a strong personality. Driven, determined, passionate, unrelenting. A hard charger, as my boss once told me. Someone who spares no fools. I'm difficult, challenging, stubborn, and persistent. It's true I'm driven for success, and I passionately and persistently try to do my very best in all that I do, encouraging those around me to hustle too. I used to think I wasn't any different than anybody else, that everyone had this same fighting spirit. It wasn't until I encountered a difficult problem in school or a difficult problem at work that I realized my type of persistence was different, that I kept going and that I wasn't afraid to speak up if I saw something that needed to be fixed. If I had an idea or I had something that might make the situation better or just might help us win. This isn't new to me, but it might be new to a lot of people. I didn't realize that for a long time, I'm really privileged to be a woman that has this opportunity, that I can speak up and share my voice, and that there's things around me to support me. It's not new to me, but it was new a few generations ago. See, when I grew up as a kid, I thought of Barbie. She was a doctor and a lawyer and a teacher, and she had all the best fashions. But see, my grandmother, she grew up in a time where she was lucky to get through the 8th grade, where she wasn't the head of her family and didn't have a lot of opportunity to make decisions. My great-great-grandmother probably didn't even get that far in school, and probably never knew what it was like to really be able to change the community around her because she never had a vote, because she never had a voice. It is unimaginable to me to think of a time when I couldn't use my voice. Imagine my surprise when last year it dawned on me that 2020 would be the 100th anniversary of women having the right to vote. I can't believe it's been so little time. I don't think I would have fit in 100 years ago. See, I've always been told I can do anything, that I'm just as good, just as tough, just as fast as the boys, because my parents told me I was. This is me. I'm the only girl out of all my siblings and the youngest. I'm also the only girl in my cousins, and so at many times at our family occasions on both sides, I stood alone. I learned really early on that to be taken seriously and treated fairly, you had to speak up. You had to not only think that you had worth, but you had to say it and push back again and again. Luckily for me, my parents told me that was okay. My parents weren't dreamers or inspirational thinkers. They were practical, pragmatic, hardworking people who got shit done. And for me, that meant more because that practical, pragmatic approach made it feel real. That it was not only accepted to speak up and fight for what you want, that it was expected. And that if you wanted to get things done, you had to fight for them. I remember growing up, I was a kid sitting at the kitchen table, and I was struggling with a math problem, and I remember thinking, like, God, I am not as smart as my brothers, like they would have had this solved by now, and I was getting really down on myself. And I remember my dad said, no, don't say that. You are just as smart as them, and you can figure this out. Okay. Then, as a kid, when I would get picked on, and I was not only the only girl, I was also the youngest and the smallest at 5'2". They'd push me and pick on me, and my parents would say, don't take that, push them back, hit them back. You don't have to take that crap from them. Even now, at 32 years old, as a professional businesswoman, when I encounter difficult problems at work, and it's like, I don't know, this client, it's just really, really being tough, my parents say, you'll figure it out. You got this. You don't need to take that from them. Thank you, Mom and Dad. I've needed that a lot. It is very much a privileged statement to have this level of support, and I get that. And while that might be true, it's also my truth. It's what I've lived and what I've known my whole life. But it isn't until recently that I realized how privileged I was, because as I said, not only am I someone who's very outspoken, am I lucky to have the support of my family around me, encouraging me to keep doing that, but I have a system and a legal right as a woman to speak up for what I want and to make change happen that I believe in. 100 years ago, not even a sliver of that would have been possible. 100 years ago, women were like property. There was this big homesteading craze, and women sought out to make things their own and to do well for their family, but they had no choices. They were not even recognized by their fellow citizens as having a voice, or that their voice was even worth listening to. Women couldn't make decisions, and they couldn't stand apart from their husband. Did you know that women couldn't even earn or own property before having the right to vote? They couldn't even go get a loan at a bank without a man signing for them. They couldn't participate in financial decision-making. And more than that, not only were they expected to marry so that their husbands could take care of them, but everything they brought into the marriage was the property of their husbands. Like if they happened to bring some pots and pans, or if they happened to bring some dresses, those were his too. In fact, if a woman and a man got married and bought a property and the man passed away, it was expected that the woman would still pay those property taxes. She couldn't decide how those were used. Women that wanted to leave their marriages, all that property was the husband, including them. That meant if they wanted to leave their marriage, they could be turned out with nothing but the clothes on their back, because everything else was the husband's. Interesting. Women had no ability to speak up and fight for what they wanted, even if they had an internal desire and an internal self-worth, recognizing that they had something to say and they could make the world better. It didn't matter, because there was no reason we had to listen to them. There was no validation that their voice counted. This went on for hundreds of years. And it was about the 1900s that women started looking around and were like, what is going on? We gotta change this. They started organizing and building groups and sharing ideas and started to talk about how they could change things. They started to talk about what it would take to get the vote. Now, you might remember the history lesson from school where the 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote, but what you probably don't realize is what a difference it made in our world. You see, a lot of women, yes, you might think of elections and politics and running for office and casting a ballot. Those are all true things, but a lot of women joined the suffrage movement because they wanted to make a decision. They wanted to participate in their communities. They wanted to be able to make financial decisions and to stand apart from their husband. They wanted better childcare, better medicine, better health care, and they wanted to have a positive impact and leave a legacy so that the next generation would have it better. It was so much more than just a ballot. It was the recognition that they mattered and that they had a legitimate right to speak their mind and to share their opinion and to have agency that was separate from their husband. It took a lot of fire for them to keep fighting. They faced jailings and protests and marches and criticisms and ridicule and failed ballot initiatives for years. It was many times that they probably wanted to quit, but they had to keep going because it was about more than that. Over time, this started to pick up steam, and you might know a little bit of the history, but South Dakota's story is a little bit different in that we started to gain a lot of steam, and we were really close to giving women the right to vote. One time we were so close that Susan B. Anthony called on all women's groups across the country to gather together and to descend on Dakota territory. I love this quote from the Wichita Eagle that says, "Heaven help Dakota and her people." I like to think if I was Susan B. Anthony or Alice Pickler, I would have been like, "Honey, heaven ain't gonna help you. They're on our side." Still, these women continued, and in South Dakota, the vote failed 4 times. 4 times. But they persisted because it wasn't just about them or their kids or their grandkids. It was about me. It was about you and you and you, and yes, even you men. They fought for you, not just for a voice, but for a platform, for what they wanted and the ability to enact change that they believed in and things they cared about, not just what their fathers, grandfathers, husbands, brothers, guy on the street told them, what they wanted. On August 26th in 1920, women earned the right to vote, but not all women. That would take several decades. But by far, this is the largest enfranchisement of a population in the history of the United States. And that for the first time since the birth of our country, the voting population looked most closely like the people it served. Pretty rare, huh? 100 years ago, I have to wonder if those women realized what they started with a signature. If they realized the torch they lit for thousands of fires that would burn for generations and create a legacy of change makers, of societal evolutions, of prosperity, of economic growth. Yes, there's women in politics. There's 3 Supreme Court justices that are women. There are hundreds of women in the legislature and hundreds more in state government. But also, as women started to participate in politics, they voted more for social spending, for welfare programs, for education, gender equality, and charitable spending, making us a better nation and more well cared after than we probably ever had been. Women stayed in school and they got an education which gave them access to white-collar occupations that they'd never had before. They started to gain in their prominence and get these positions that allowed them to be their head of household, that they could be the breadwinner in their family. It opened up new occupations to them where before they primarily just worked in textiles. They started working in manufacturing and engineering and technology and healthcare, and we started to see this growth in women's roles. In 1920, just 20% of women worked outside the home, but today, it's well over 65%. Not only that, it is because of women's increased participation in the workforce that the economy is $2 trillion bigger than it would have been if women would have stayed home. It's clear that we are better off when we allow the people to participate and share their voice and fight for what they believe in. Now, after women earned the vote, it's true voter turnout was low. It took some time for them to get registered, but they gained steam. And as you saw, it really started to change the world around them. But not only did we change the world in the early 1900s and turn of the century, but we continue to change the world every single day with the choices that we make and the way we choose to make history. Women continue to turn out the vote at higher rates than men and have outvoted men in every presidential election since 1984. We have closed the gap and we have exceeded them in turnout. We all won when women earned the vote. Every single person has had the benefit and the privilege of a wealthier nation, of more opportunities, of a better cared for public because women participated, and that includes men. But don't celebrate yet. The fight isn't over. You see, as we are on the eve of election season, I'm sure many of you are very excited for the political commercials to start, for us to get out there. I work in advertising, I know. But with so much negativity and the infighting and the partisan politics, how many of us just say, I want to disengage, I want to stay home? While women fought for over 70 years to earn the vote and to validate their voice, there are still few people who are registered, and of those who are eligible, few are turning out the vote. Nationwide in 2018, 51% of the eligible voting population voted. 51%. In South Dakota, we did a little better, 65% in 2018. Now, I'm not a history professor and I'm not a math teacher, but the last time I checked, 65% was like a D or an F. I think we have more work to fight for. We are fighting and opening new doors and knocking at new opportunity, which is incredible, but it is not going to mean anything if we do not continue to vote and, more importantly, remember what it took to get the vote and to have our voices be heard. We are at risk of losing all of it. I am a product of the hard-fought privileges of the women and the suffragists that came before me. And until a few months ago, I had no idea what it took for them to get here or for me to be here. And I am ashamed. But I'm very grateful too. I'm grateful because it is because of their persistence, their tenacity and determination, their grit, their audacious belief in success, and never failing to keep going, that I can go get a loan by myself, thank you. I can own my own home. I'm a businesswoman who can have lots of opportunity. I lead a team of both men and women. I'm able to have my own choices and choose what I want to do if whatever I want in my future lies ahead. I can be bold, outspoken, difficult, determined, and still spare no fools because of those women who came before me. As we celebrate the 100th anniversary nearly to the day today, I challenge you to think about the women who influenced you and who paved the road before you and who opened new opportunities. Think about your home, your paycheck, your church, your kids, your future, and your job, and whatever else may come. Where would you be if we wouldn't have fought for the vote? And how are you using your vote and your voice to make a legacy for the future? You tell me, was suffrage worth the struggle, or is voting obsolete? Thank you.